Okay. All right, I got all my windows open. So this is the session about presenting and turning what you're doing into shared research through written proposals and through presentations. And what I'm going to specifically talk about in this little session, this very introductory miniature session, is brief proposals for the undergraduate research conference and giving small, short presentations. If you want more information about presenting and writing longer things, we can talk about that some other time, or I can get you some more resources. But that's what we're talking about today, because we have a couple of events that you all have been made aware of, and that is the Summer Scholar Celebration at the end of July. That's Tuesday, the 26th at 2 o'clock currently. And that's going to be the last event where you just say, over this course of 5 or 10 weeks that I was given the opportunity to do independent research, here is what I set out to learn, and here is what I learned, and here's what I'm going to keep doing toward this project, or here are my goals. So that is the presentation that you're expected to give. It is brief, but it's still talking in front of people, and a lot of people don't like that. They don't like it without structure. They don't feel confident. So I'm trying to work towards that a little bit today. And then there is the undergraduate research conference in the spring. We have a tentative date right now, March 31st, though that could change, but I don't know that it will. Anyway, it's near the end of March, and you do have to write a written proposal to submit to that. And so we're going to talk about those things for this reason. So first up is proposal. Why do you write a proposal? It's because you want to present your research. You want to share it with people. And sometimes there is like a gate to sharing that research, and that is this proposal. You are submitting it to perhaps a society for presenting, or your college's undergraduate research conference. But either way, you have to write something that you want to talk about. The purpose of a proposal is to be concise. It's to highlight important parts of the project. It's descriptive. It doesn't use jargon. It's clear cut. And the audience of a proposal is general in most cases, especially in our case. Now, if you go to like a highly specialized conference, it'll be less general. But proposals are by nature brief, to the point, and without a whole lot of fluff. So I want you to take a couple of minutes, if you want to do this on your computer, or if you want to do it on a piece of paper, just write about the work you've been doing, what you've done, what you plan to do, and what you hope you'll learn. And I'll pause the recording and let you know when this is done. So hopefully you've had a chance to write a couple of things down. But this is how all proposal writing can start, just by brain dump. This is how all writing could start too. You're not really expected to have a fully formed, oh, that was my timer. A fully formed proposal from the very beginning, and just getting your thoughts on paper can be part of it. But what I'm hoping that you'll find in your free write is that you have written a little bit about why you have done this project. What about it is important to you? What is the purpose? Why are you doing it? This is one of the components of a research proposal, is establishing a reason for doing this through either context of the field, or through like an immediate need. This is a component of the research proposal. And this is where you can also be really passionate about what you're saying. And I know I said that proposals are supposed to be clear cut and to the point and brief, but that doesn't mean they have to lack energy or passion. So this is where you can say, like, this is a problem that I am passionate about and that needs to be addressed, and that's why I'm doing this. Examples of this might be like, are there people or places who are affected by an issue that you're researching? And how your research question proposes to address that issue. Maybe there's a real life problem that affects your discipline, and you're proposing to solve that problem, or at least address how to solve that problem. You never want to say like, I have all the answers, but you do want to say like, I realize this is an issue and I'm working toward figuring it out. There's also a component. The next component that I have here is how you're going to address that problem. Excuse me. So maybe you've written in your free write, like, this is what I'm doing every day. I'm doing data analysis. I'm reading these texts. I am applying text to things. This is how you're doing. This is your method. If you're doing something scientific, you might want to say, this is how my method is testing my hypothesis. Or if you're doing something artistic, which none of you in this room currently are right now, you might say something like, well, let me back up and say, a proposal sounds a little bit foreign. Maybe an artist statement would be more relevant to that, but you're still talking about how you're doing it, right? This is really general, but it applies to most disciplines. So you want to talk about how you're exploring your issue. And then hopefully in your free write, you've written something about like what this means to the future implications of your practice or your research. What is all of this going to do? What will result in what I do? What do those results mean? And if they did not have the intended effect, what else could you have done or will you do going forward to try to achieve that intended effect? Any questions so far about that? Were you able to find things like this in your free write? Pieces of it, fragments of it? Okay, excellent. Any questions? Okay. There are other things to consider depending on where you write a proposal. You might want to consider the audience. I mentioned already that audiences might be general. Our conference's audience is very general. So if you're using very specific words that are in your discipline, like they make sense, you want to make sure you either define those or use layman's terms and avoid jargon when you're doing that. Jargon can include abbreviations. It can include any words that won't make sense to people above a specific grade level. So pay attention to that depending on where you submit. Tone is also important. Like I said, you're not trying to be long-winded. You're trying to be sort of academic, but in a way that people understand, and not in a way that is boring, but that in a way that is exciting to your discipline. And then sometimes there are word count limits. I would not worry about that until the end, because sometimes they hinder how you're writing. So that's something to think of. And if your conference has a theme, you would want to address how this applies to that theme. So other things to consider, but not necessarily the main things. All right, I have here your turn. I want you to try to take a few more minutes to turn what you've written in a free write into those three components: why you've done this research, how you did it, or how you're continuing to do it, and what that means, what impact that might have. So you can even just jot down a few things. You don't have to write a whole proposal. I don't think that's possible really in the next couple of minutes, but see if you can turn those bullet points into a few more words for yourself if you haven't already. Okay. It's just been a couple of minutes, but I hope that was helpful in just thinking about structure of a proposal. Do you all have any questions about what else you might say or include? Okay. This is something that you can keep working on. And I urge you to get feedback from your advisor. If you want writing help, the Writing Center on campus does help with that. But your advisor is probably the best person to go to first for things like this. That's why they're there, your mentor. Okay, so if you want to see other proposal examples, we have a link on our website that has a few examples. That's not this, one second. If you go to the OUR website and you go to conference and participate, there are submission guidelines down here. And it says, for example, of previously submitted proposals, click here. This is where it breaks down those different components, and it shows you examples of how that has been done. And there are different presentation topics here. So if you want to look at something that's similar to your topic, well, it's not going to let me click. You can go down and find it here and say, oh, okay, this is the purpose. Clearly, this is the method. This is the implications. But this is on the website. You can access it anytime you want to, underneath submission guidelines. Okay, so now we're going to shift gears. This is a little bit different, unlike writing a proposal, which you've hopefully already gotten is clear, informative, concise, right? An oral presentation is more about communicating with verbal cues. And therefore it's less like it's less 1, 2, 3, and it's more about telling a story. And it's more about telling your story and captivating people with your story. So this can be a little bit easier for some people or a little bit more difficult depending on how you operate. But what you're doing in your story, and you're giving a presentation, is you're not writing a paper. And I want to talk a little bit about structuring a narrative for a story versus structuring a proposal with these different components. So this is a lot of different part of your brain, so to speak. What I'm not going to talk about here is like how to make slides look nice. So if you have questions about that, that's part of a lot of presentations, but there are plenty of tools that we have tips for, and I've got some links if you would like them on how to make your slides look nice and professional, but not goofy or gimmicky. We've got resources on that, but I'm not going to talk about them right now. So how to make a story. I want to do another little thought experiment. And I want you to pretend that you're like, I've got this Pixar thing here because I want you to think about this as a story that's captivating, like all of the Toy Stories or whatever. And I want you to think about your research that way. So map your story real quick with this formula. Once upon a time, this is the context that sets up the background of your research. And then you want to build consistence with the rest of this. Every day, this stuff happened the old way. One day, you came along and you decided to do it this way. Because of that, this happened. And then because of that, this other thing happened. Until finally, this new thing emerges because of your research, or at least hopefully emerges, or will impact somebody. So instead of like, this is why I'm doing my research, and this is how I'm doing it, and this is it, I want you to think of this more as like a compelling story arc. So take a minute. You see my theme here. Take a minute and try to rewrite your proposal or the components of your proposal into this story arc. I'm going to pause yet again, and I'll come back to you in a second. Okay, I'm going to copy and paste an example of this in the chat. This is something that I stole from somebody else, but this is an example of this narrative structure for a scientific paper. And I will be honest and tell you that I have no idea what some of these things mean, but I'm totally captivated because they have introduced a problem and have explained it in a way that is palatable, and they've started to build suspense. So here's just an example of how this could look. And you can structure the beginning of a talk this way to kind of tell people, to grab attention and say, like, once upon a time. You don't have to use those words, but you can say, like, this is the background and this is what we've been used to. But now listen up, because I've got something new to put in the mix here. So the next thing that you can do in a presentation, because you've got a few more minutes in space and time than in a research proposal, is to talk about the highlights of your research. And this is a little bit of a thing like a training montage you've seen in the movie. Like, you just want to get the highlights of what you've done. You're building suspense even. I know you don't think about it that way, but you're talking about what exciting details have changed the course of your research. And you're sort of giving yourself, bear with me, this is cheesy, but you're giving yourself kind of a hero journey arc with this training montage / highlights reel of what you've done. And it's a lot like talking about your method, but if you think about it this way, it's less like listing things that you've done that are important to the research, and more like building evidence for your story to make it more compelling. And so in this part, you don't want every detail. You just want the things that are important to the arc of your story. And you're persuading people with this evidence, and you're saying, like, these are the important parts. This is what makes my research interesting. And this is where you can use visual aids in your PowerPoints or whatever. This is where you can use images from your work. All of this is part of the building of suspense. I won't make you pause and list this, but I want to pause and see if y'all have questions before I keep going. No. Okay. Excuse me. And then in the last part of your talk, has anybody seen The Karate Kid? This is going to be, okay, we got a yes. Brooke, have you seen The Karate Kid? No? Okay, let me set it up. So at the end of a talk, you want to return to the beginning of the talk and be like, see, this is what I was talking about. Now that we can do this research our way, everything I showed you up to this point has led to something specific. And you want to go back to the beginning and say, this is how we were thinking before, but now, we've transformed. And in this scene in The Karate Kid, you see him training, and he's just, part of his training is to just stand like the crane. This is like the crane, and he just stands like that for hours. But in the very end, he does that again, and you're like, oh, what's going to happen? And this is like the big fight scene at the very end. And he uses that stance to defeat the enemy, as you see here. So he's kind of coming back to the beginning, and it's building suspense even a little bit more. So what you're doing in your talk, rather than, kicking somebody in the face, is doing that metaphorically with a return to the beginning and say, like, so when I said we were doing this research to demonstrate, why this is important, you can now see that the implications of this have consequence, and those are X, Y, Z. So I have another example, and it's Steve Jobs, and I'm going to play you a clip because he kind of does this well. This is not in any way me advocating for Apple or Steve Jobs as a human or whatever. But it is a good example of how you can build a narrative arc by giving evidence and captivating through some of these methods. So can you all see? Well, I'm gonna push play, and if there's a delay or you can't see or hear something, say something in the chat and I'll just pause it and put the link in there for later.
1984, we introduced the Macintosh. It didn't just change Apple, it changed the whole computer industry. In 2001, we introduced the first iPod. And it didn't just, it did.
Okay, I'm gonna look at my settings real quick. Can y'all hear me? You can? Okay. I'm gonna just not play it. I'll put this in the chat for you to watch later if you want to. It's just a clip. But basically he goes on, he's like, we used to have these three separate things and we're introducing them in a whole new way. And at the very end, he like goes, and it's the same product. It's the iPhone. So, you know, back then everybody was like wowed and we were like, yeah, big deal right now. But the arc of that story is like, here's how we've always done things. And we've been working on making them better. And now we're going to launch this. And then he goes through how the iPhone, the iPod, the phone, and the internet have evolved. And that now they're all going to be in one thing. And you can touch it with your hands. So it's very good and captivating in that kind of way. It's obviously not academic research, but really presenting, and especially presenting in the undergraduate research conference. And at the end of the summer for the celebration, you're just really being asked to talk about the arc of your story. You're not really being asked to say, you know, I came to these XYZ conclusions. So I wanted to assure you that you don't have to get into the nitty gritty, at least at this point. You want to get more involved for a conference-like presentation. But for the summer, it's really a short 5 to 10 minute tops overview of what you've been able to accomplish. So I sort of switched gears here just to talk a little bit about what to expect at the end of the summer. But the last things that I'll say are practicing is really something that I suggest making time to do. It does feel like a weird thing to do sometimes, to ask somebody to watch you practice, but getting feedback on your practice is a super valuable thing to do. It's also good to just be yourself. Don't try to do things that you're uncomfortable with. If you don't think you're a funny person, don't try to make jokes. And even if you are a funny person, like maybe jokes don't always hit right with certain people. but be yourself. And then everybody says don't read from slides, but there are always exceptions to reading from slides, especially if you have a really good thing that you read and you want to share with people. So those are tips in presenting. For the end of the summer, we will have an in-person event, and you can present remotely if you have to, if you've already moved or something. But we will have it and we will save it. So do y'all have any questions about that event or about any of the things that we've talked about so far? I have a couple of resources that you can look at if you're still interested in, and I'm going to send you all these slides. But if you're interested in shaping something up, but I want to give you time to ask anything you have a question about for the last event that we have for the summer or for going forward.
I have a question about mind methods, but I didn't know, because it doesn't really pertain to anyone, if you just wanted me to email you.
What's your question? And then I'll tell you how to ask your question.
So with my method, is it the data coming from the books that I'm reading and the sources that I'm finding within my annotated bibliography?
So for humanities-based research, your method is I did this, I read from these sources, and I'm applying this ideology or this theory to this work.
Okay.
So yeah, in essence, it can include more things, but yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Brooks or Dr. Hagee, do you all have anything to add? I think, I can't tell.
Just to make sure.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
You can go first.
I was going to check to let you guys know that if you're ever in doubt, most conferences will give you examples and they will spell out in the guidelines that you need. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel of trying to find somebody that's attending the conference, or if your advisor isn't familiar with that conference, everybody will post what their requirements are. And as Hillary pointed out, it's better to start with a lot of content and then you go through revisions to make it the best possible, short, easy to understand summary as possible. Because some conferences will be very particular about how you even input things. So you may not be able to submit a Word document. You may have to copy and paste things into a form, and spell check doesn't exist in that form. So you just have to be cautious when submitting information, or when they ask for your information, that you can always go into those conference websites or visit those guidelines, because they're very good about telling you how your final product should look like, or what to expect when you complete the application process. Because a lot of people get stuck when they don't know the answer to something because they're filling out a web form. And then you have to go back and figure out, well, what is it that I was supposed to do? And then you get timed out, or you have an incomplete submission because you're trying to follow the same method of copying and pasting things. So my suggestion is for you to just look at the guidelines, look for an example, go through the example that they give you first, put it in a Word document, and then either convert it to a PDF if that's what they want, or use your Word document to cut and paste carefully into the submission boxes, so that way you have things that are not misspelled or grammatical errors or repetitive sentences.
Thank you. Elena, did you want to add something?
So my question is, during the Summer Scholars Celebration, whenever we each give our 5-minute spiel, like a presentation, we're going one at a time, right? Or are we? Okay.
Yes, you'll have your own allotted time. And I'm going to paste a link into chat of last year's celebration. This is going to be a little bit different this year than last year's, because we decided to do this midway through the program, but now this is going to be a little bit more structured. So I'll have you come to the front so that the camera picks you up better and things like that. So yeah, you'll have your own time, and there may or may not be questions from people at the end. And usually these questions go along the lines of like, how did you decide to do that? Or like, wow, how interesting. Tell me about this cool thing that you learned. It's not going to be an interrogative as much as it will be just like, I think that's neat. Good job, you know? So I don't want you to feel like you're being under inquisition or anything. If anybody asks you a question, it's mostly just a expression of interest.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? All right. This is it then. Thank you for today. And our last professional development session will be next week. It's about applying to graduate school. And it will also be virtual because our presenter is going to be a guest, and she's going to be virtual as well. So look out for that. And we'll have 2 wellness sessions with games this week. And then next week will be, since we canceled our movie night last time, we're going to try that again and see what happens. But be on the lookout for those, and best of luck for the rest of the summer with your research as we kind of take our descent.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Y'all let me know if you have any questions in the meantime.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.